I wasn't expecting to receive a review copy of this game. Apparently, the people at Spike Chunsoft have just been working on another spin-off title for Danganronpa behind the scenes. I was surprised that there was no announcement for it before receiving this. Danganronpa hasn't had a new release for 3 years, with the last one being Danganronpa Fanservice Simulator, and no story releases in 7 years. It's also weird because it's another spin-off title, one that's divorced from the style of Ultra Despair Girls. It explores a character whose existence is debatably retconned by the ending of Danganronpa V3. Actually, is there anything I wasn't surprised by? I suppose the choice of leading role, Mahiru Koizumi, as you might have guessed by the title, Danganronpa Zetsubo no Shashin, which got localized to Photograph of Despair. A lot of fans feel she missed her potential in Danganronpa 2, and as much as I don't think she did, watch this video for more thoughts, I can at least kind of understand why, even if I don't agree. Hell, Kodaka himself said in an interview that if he did do a spin-off with the 77th class, he would probably pick to do one with Koizumi in the protagonist's hot seat, which makes it even weirder that, like Ultimate Summer Camp, he wasn't a writer on the project beyond his credit for Danganronpa 2. Instead, lead writing went to Yuta Nishiyama, whose only previous writing credits I could find were some 2019 obscure anime film, The Wonderful and Horrible Life of Kamago Hitsui, and in terms of video games, 1996's equally obscure Crimson Steel for the Nintendo 64. So, 2 known prior writing credits. His only video game credit was from 28 years ago. There's over 20 years between those 2 writing credits, and he's never worked at Spike Chunsoft or any related company. Was this a case of not having anyone else to write for it? What was Kodaka so busy with that he turned down one of the few ideas he was interested in returning to? What little info I'd been given and had found had me absolutely full of questions. Among them, why was I sent a review copy of the game? Like, sure, one of the few pandemic-core Danganronpa channels that has still largely dedicated themselves to it, but when several Dangantubers received early access codes for Danganronpa S Ultimate Summer Camp, I wasn't one of them. Then again, they've, for the most part, moved on, and the creator of Kumitante Old School Slaughter has outright said that my endorsement has helped lead ICE to their project, so maybe I've become some hot real estate for shilling Danganronpa products? Sure, I'll do that! Behold, the anti-capitalism leaving my body. Anyway, the game is, funnily enough, a PC first release. I think exclusivity is stupid, and you should at least also release your game to the PC, because otherwise eventually people will do that for you, whether you like it or not, and whether you threaten to sue them into the ground or not. So hurry up and release Raincode for PC already so I can hurl more money at you. But whatever. I got told that I could do pretty much whatever I wanted with a review copy. So here is me, sticking the review code up my... Oh, they meant I could review it and analyze it ahead of its April 31st release date and give all my honest thoughts. That makes more sense. I was even more confused when I booted the game up. The aesthetic seemed less like the psychopop used for the series and more akin to a late 90s, early 2000s survival horror game, right down to a somewhat different art style in the few instances that there were new art assets, more on that shortly. It's admittedly not the weirdest direction for a Danganronpa game. Hell, Kodaka cites Illbleed, a 2001 survival horror B-movie thing for the Dreamcast, as one of his major inspirations for Danganronpa, and Illbleed would be the tail end of that era of horror gaming. There was also that whole thing with Twilight Syndrome Murder Mystery, which obviously took from the Twilight Syndrome games of that era as well. I wondered whether this would lean into more authentic recreations of the PlayStation 1's capabilities and how they were worked around, if it would use updated technology to help improve the game feel, or if it was going to wallow in using them as a supplement for nostalgia so they didn't have to do as much intensive 3D modeling. And the answer was somehow a combination of all three. Booted the game up and the menu screen was quite pleasant, some slightly foreboding music and definitely nothing too offensive, but nothing original either. Which, like, as long as your title screen functions and is passable, I don't particularly care if it's the most generic thing in existence. I hit start and got treated to a quick 1-minute opening, which was semi-animated. That's nice, though I think I would have preferred that weird first-generation FMV. It would objectively look worse, but it has that, like, kind of authentic PlayStation 1 feel, you know? Once the actual game starts, however, shit ain't right. For one, there's no controller support yet, but the game has fucking tank controls. Which is, yeah, iconic, but pretty fucking hard to control with a controller, let alone with a computer. Left and right don't turn you either, they strafe. You turn with the mouse. What? Did Junko Enoshima design this fucking control scheme? The camera controls aren't much better in that there are no camera controls and the camera just kind of follows you around. It works okay in wide open spaces, but every time I was in an enclosed room, and there's quite a few of those, I had to practically wrestle with the camera to get it to behave itself because, as I said before, no camera controls, you turn with the mouse. Tight corridor chases were the absolute worst. I got used to it after a while, but man. Another thing I found strange is the art direction, at least for 3D gameplay. The models are recognizable as the characters that they're depicting, but there's just something frequently off about them, in ways that wasn't the case in Ultra Despair Girls. At least all the character models fit together loosely with each other. The environments do not. Hell, with the exception of Hope's Peak itself, the environments honestly look like they came directly out of a mid to late 2000s Valve game or something like that. It's weird to see these clearly cartoony models walking around environments considered the peak of realism when most of my audience was born. The 2D assets are mostly recycled from Danganronpa 2, which, fair enough, it's meant to take place before Saionji's growth spurt. There's not much point in making new assets when the old ones will do. One thing that is new is the HUD elements, although you don't get a lot of those. You get an inventory screen that looks suspiciously similar to the one in the original Resident Evil games. You get text boxes, and these are quite nice. But there's also something I thought was unique, using an ID card as a health meter. Koizumi's health is displayed in her ID card in the corner of the screen via the ID's color. It's a little cumbersome, but it's a decent indication of how she's doing. Green for fine, yellow for caution, and red for critical. You regain health by staying still for extended periods of time, not by snorting herbs or chugging a monster energy. While it comes back at a decent pace, it's not always an option to stand still and try to recover health. There's a couple of bandages you can use to instantly recover all health, but there's only a couple of them over the entire game. Luckily, you can save at any point, which does feel a little bit like a cop-out, considering the system used in Resident Evil gave a way to save your progress that was like everything else in the game, a resource to manage. Gameplay is, well, kind of a generic survival horror game from 1996 to 2003. Camera follows you around and sucks at navigating narrow corridors, aforementioned really awkward tank controls, the usual puzzle is put thing A in thing B, with a couple more complex ones in there. The game itself is not that difficult, but Koizumi doesn't have very many options for dealing with any threats. It's mostly run away and hide, or stand there and die. The threats are, thankfully, a little bit slower than she is usually, with one notable exception. But honestly, I haven't decided if the bad controls are merely irritating to deal with, or really contribute to the survival horror experience. Because when pursued by an enemy, it can be really tense to get through that door at the last second by the skin of your teeth. But it can also just be annoying when you just need to, explore a thing or something. The soundtrack is pretty nice, though. I really buy that there was strong inspiration from some of the earliest that survival horror had to offer, though the musical tone gets a little bit torpedoed on the few occasions where they do try to reuse tracks from Super Danganronpa 2. Man, mostly new music tracks and mostly reused art assets? The priorities for what to reuse and for what to make anew is kind of wild. I don't think it's bad inherently to reuse, just that it's almost random for this game. Now, after discussing the gameplay a bit, what was I here for exactly? Oh yeah, the game explores Koizumi's deep-seated traumas and relationships with the others involved in the case of Natsumi and Sato in a really well-executed way thing. At least in terms of the story. It starts about a week after Sato's murder, with tension still boiling. Koizumi enters this diner to talk to the other Twilight Syndrome murder girls, which acts as a brief tutorial to get used to the gameplay and controls. The opening also establishes all the Twilight Syndrome murder girls' tones towards the case. Miyoda's keeping her energy up and even kind of using the tragedy for writing material, happily announcing to the other three she's writing the bat-bloodied steel slaughter of my friend. Smiki's a sobbing mess about the whole thing, as predicted, and Saionji's equally as predictably annoyed about the whole thing, but they've all made the decision to keep quiet about any of their potential involvement. Koizumi's about the only one who's acting really out of it, and the other girls are getting worried she might wind up confessing that they were the first to discover Natsumi's body. Of course, we already know Koizumi is involved with the case more than these three, since she deleted a photo at Sato's request that would have incriminated her in the murder. Saionji gives Koizumi a heartfelt but clear warning to keep quiet, not wanting to be questioned about their involvement. If not to avoid the police, to avoid the ire of the Kuzuryu clan, since she correctly assumes that they had to be involved in Sato's death. Though her methods of getting there are definitely Saionji reasonings. I should mention voice acting at this point. There isn't any, which is weird. New music, new models and environment design, but mostly old sprites, and no voice acting? Was Yu Kobayashi busy doing vocal work for a Bakugan reboot and they had no replacements? It means death scenes are either eerily silent or clearly using the old vocal work. Oh yeah, there's no English voice acting work at all, it's all the Japanese original. I mean, there's a lot of PlayStation revival games that have little to no voice acting, but they tend to be the ones where it's just walk around the spoopy low polygon woods for 5 minutes and then this post-it note will do a scare. For it to be a Danganronpa spin-off, heavy on story yet containing no voice acting, is definitely noticeable. Oh well, it's better than using AI-generated voices at least. Koizumi is supposed to head to her parents' apartment after this meeting, but a flashback to what she saw on the days of Natsumi and Sato's murder sends her into a brief panic attack. One that embarrasses her so much she hops off the bus at the next stop. She gets stuck in the downtown area a bit waiting for the next one, and whoops! Koizumi doesn't realize she's close to Kuzuryu clan territory. You actually briefly encounter Pekoyama here, who, while we know works with Kuzuryu as a hitman and might have been the one to kill Sato, Koizumi doesn't know, though she does know that Pekoyama seems to act strangely curious regarding the murders. This leads to one of the first dialogue puzzles of the game, saying the right things to Pekoyama for information, while not divulging too much information yourself. It's a neat little moment, I think, to help flesh the two out, and a unique puzzle type for this sort of game. Even if you can't really fail, because Koizumi will tell you why that won't work, so not really a puzzle. Eventually, the next bus arrives for Koizumi and she heads off. The game establishes that it's a visitors' weekend where the Ultimates at Hope's Peak can head home to spend time with their families. Koizumi heads into her apartment, hoping her mother might be home. Alas, not the case. It's just her father, who's not a happy camper about Koizumi going to Hope's Peak. The apartment has fallen to ruin because of the whole dad is a deadbeat with infinite milk and cigarettes in his fridge thing. Koizumi's dad accuses her of abandoning her family, heavily implying he doesn't really respect her, but never saying anything that explicitly ties into that fact. Shit like accusing her photography of not being a special form of art or anything of value, it's not as dangerous as the war photography her mother does or as meaningful, and really tearing her down for even accepting her place at Hope's Peak with her portfolio. It's absolutely not what she needs or wants to hear right now, but even just asserting that gets her scolded more. Next we see her, she's on the floor of her tiny dusty bedroom in absolute tears. As someone whose father and several other figures in their life were or are very similar to the way Koizumi is depicted here, someone who keeps trying to find the tiniest insecurities to prod at to destroy your self-esteem while maintaining an easy case to say that you're simply crazy or overreacting, by not prodding for anything major in an obvious way, but by building on the tiny things so you look insane when it all boils over, changing up whether you can take care of yourself or not, depending on what's more convenient for the argument they're making. It's nightmarish, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemies. We knew Koizumi's dad was shitty, but getting to see how shitty when Koizumi's already at a low point in her life is outright devastating, and I think sets up an extremely engaging premise for a horror game. One of the most effective types of horror is isolation, more effective than whatever that Lovecraft fellow was going on about between dying of intestinal cancer and letting his dad name his cats racial slurs. While the big scary monster, quote, jumping out of a cupboard going a bloogie boogie woo, can be scary in its own right, isolation is an effective tool in the arsenal of a horror game, yet I feel like it's underutilized in stories. Sure, some games might have you be alone facing the horrors, but it's always because everything around you is dead. Rarely is everything alive, but either can't or won't help you. The fear of the unknown can be inoculated and overcome by knowledge, but the horror of isolation requires human connection and belief. And all too frequently, we deny that connection to each other, and isolation can do much more horrifying things to the psyche. The opening does an extremely good job selling you that Koizumi has been isolated from her support systems due to the murders, as she goes through the photos on her camera. Her dad's not going to be any help, there's no telling when mum will be home. Her friends think she might knock on them, and her best friend is dead. The friendly smiles she scrolls through on their camera and now feel like they're just a lens, a snapshot to a past they'll never have back. The game is kind of fanficky in that way, making use of an established IP to set up an unexplored conflict. I think that's an effective use of a fanfic. it doesn't have to spend time setting up who Koizumi is, instead making her conflict central to the main horror elements. And to be honest, I find it a lot scarier to be isolated, alone in a room with people, and afraid of the future than I am of, like, bleeding eye sockets and a Cheshire grin of sharp teeth painting "Let's play, mommy" on the walls. Koizumi receives a phone call from Hinata soon after, about the only lifeline she has left at this point. He tells her that there was some more evidence relating to the case discovered at Sato's house, and she should head over as soon as she can. This launches us into the first official scenario of the game. Koizumi sneaks out of her house after her dad falls asleep and takes the train to Sato's neighborhood. The neighborhood's covered in deep fog that wasn't present in any other neighborhoods, and the sky goes dark within a few minutes, despite Japan being nowhere near the equator. That's weird. Anyway, I wandered around the neighborhood trying to figure out which house was Sato's and getting my bearings on the controls again. This is one of those no perfect solution things, and I think this was the better route to take, but not having a clear objective marker is definitely a choice. Like, this is Koizumi's best friend's house, and you're telling me she doesn't have a clue which one on the street it is, and she's wandering back and forth down the street trying to find it like she's trying to find the one unused toilet in the fucking food court? It does make for some effective tension building, but it makes Sato and Koizumi not look as close as they should be. Eventually, I did figure out which house I was meant to enter, but weirdly, no Hinata outside, where I'd expect him to be if he said more evidence was discovered, or at least standing outside like a sentient objective marker, which now that I say that, it seems like that would have been the good solution. I thought he might be inside, so I managed to find the key under one of the stones in the footpath, and after a bit more wandering around, let myself into the house. So to reiterate what's happened so far, we've been asked not to snitch on our living friends that we found some courses before anyone else, we've been abused by our dad, we've been called out by a guy who couldn't be bothered to show up where he told us to go, we've broken into our dead friend's house, the house is definitely a certified not haunted place, and Sato's parents are definitely home and screaming at Koizumi for breaking into the house. Oh, never mind, he did show up. Wait, he can't die, he was the leading role of the hit cult classic video game Super Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair Academy, a game which takes place after this one in the Danganronpa timeline. You might think that's me nitpicking, but this was actually kind of where I was hooked. The game's already established some pretty strange things going on that are difficult to explain without supernatural elements, but not impossible. Without a definitive supernatural element, the only way to explain this is that Koizumi is experiencing guilty hallucinations, and personally I find that a really awful trope if there's nothing else to support it. Alongside winding up pretty ableist if not handled with the utmost care, and it usually isn't, even in media claiming to be authentic to, quote, mental illness. It's grabbing the player and shaking them while screaming, "Do you get it? They feel guilty about what happened to this other character. The other character is speaking to them inside their brain to berate them, but it's actually their guilty conscience. Do you get it? Yes! David Cage, Your Turn to Die, Cult of Chucky, and every subpar Fongon who thinks they're better than the source material ever written, I get it!" However, by introducing the potential of a supernatural element to it, it actually creates a sense of mystery. There's no longer an easy explanation of Koizumi suffering from a rapid onset case of what resembles badly written schizophrenia. Spirits, ghosts, demons, a manifestation of evil, any or none of them could be fucking with her. The potential for it being both means that there's an effective mystery. Why is this happening, and why is it happening to Koizumi specifically? I head upstairs, look around Sato's room a bit, find her journal, immediately steal my deceased friend's private property, and then... Uh-oh. This is the first chase sequence of the game, and it's in one of those goddamn enclosed spaces. Most of them are. Chase sequence, I hear you ask, forgetting not all of you have played Clock Tower. For one, do it, it's one of the earliest building blocks of modern survival horror, and for two, I found the chases similar to the ones in Ghost Head, with the dreaded zombies surgically removed with a scalpel. Different chasers that behave kind of similarly, but have different aspects to them. Run, hide, except you're stuck as Alyssa because there's no guns lying around the house because Koizumi lives in Japan and not Mumrika. Although Clock Tower Ghost Head took place in Japan as well, so... I run out of Sato's room, hide inside the upstairs bathroom, and pray whatever's chasing me decides to just go away. And what is chasing me, you ask? So yeah, whatever's chasing Koizumi at this stage is definitely using Hinata's image to fuck with her. Which had me asking, well, did Hinata even call Koizumi? And when you know it, Koizumi had the exact same thought. With that thing up and running, she has to be quiet, but she calls Hinata just to confirm he did send her to Sato's house. So yeah, the phone call was also to fuck with Koizumi, and now she's stuck in this actually decent-sized house and Sato's parents were clearly rolling in the dough. Koizumi waits for Hinata to search a different room, quietly races for the front door, and let's stop the video right here for a fun little quiz! Do you think the door will be locked, 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 or all of the above? It's gone. No, I don't mean the door is missing and she can easily leave. I mean the door is gone and there's just a black void outside. Still possibly Koizumi's imagination. Koizumi actually considers taking a photo of the door to confirm what she saw to Hinata, but remembers her camera's flash produces a very audible click. I felt this story moment really was effective for that survival horror atmosphere. Rather than it being an accident she doesn't see coming, Koizumi's choice to document strange things she's seeing is another resource. Not necessarily the film on her camera, since it's 2012 and her camera is digital, but because she has to choose between being able to possibly prove something weird's going on while alerting something that wants to kill her to her presence, or being able to escape easier at the cost of not being able to prove what she saw. I thought that was an incredibly effective moment, even if I didn't get to make the decision. Ultimately, she decides to take the picture, and this does alert the non-Hinata to the fact that she is down the stairs near the front door. More booking it ensues. If you manage to get away from Hinata, I'm gonna call him Hinata until the real Hinata shows up, Koizumi will realize the back door hasn't been engulfed by the sauce and decides it's her best escape route. I thought breaking a window might have been more effective, but when I went to try, Koizumi admits she still isn't sure if she's hallucinating or not and doesn't want to damage the property of an already grieving family. Breaking into the house? Good. Breaking the house? Bad. Oh, why'd I say if you manage to get away? It's a funny story. I was joking a bit about Clock Tower Ghost Head earlier, but it turns out Danganronpa Photograph of Despair takes a few more cues from it. There's the fact both it and Twilight Syndrome were developed by Human Entertainment, and that Ghost Head, the third game in its series, was a spin-off title. But Ghost Head was universally panned, and one of its bad endings was a massive contributor to the panning. It's not the only game to have bad endings in survival horror, in fact they're pretty common in the genre. But Ghost Head's bad endings were seriously unfair, and judging by the bad ending here, if you fail to get away from Hinata, I'll admit, it made me a little worried for the rest of the game. But I mean, it wasn't like they were going to set up a situation in which Koizumi has to try to survive a killer objectively stronger than her in every conceivable way while threatening to erase the entire chapter's save file and give you a bad ending if you fuck it up, right? Right? Foreshadowing is a literary device in which the rest of the scenario actually doesn't last very long. Maybe it does if you're unsure of where the parents would keep their keys, but I figured it would most likely be in their room. So I go back upstairs while Hinata's stuck in the garage, find the keys on the side table, head back downstairs, get slaughtered, head back downstairs, unlock the back door, and boom. Scenario 1 is over as Koizumi makes a break for the real Hinata and is, oh, Hinata can just drive a car. That's fine. That's good, actually. What's legal driving age in Japan? Either Hinata's just been confirmed as a legal adult, or as an underage driver. Or Nishiyama doesn't know the legal driving age of his own country. Any of the three is hilarious. Like, can you tell me right now that you know the legal driving age of your country? I think mine's 16, but I'm not gonna look that up myself. Just probably a bunch of comments down there, like, laughing at me, going like, haha, Neeks, the legal driving age of Australia is actually 4. Hinata drives Koizumi back to the nearest train station, and Koizumi tries to explain what she saw while exploring the house to Hinata. She even tries to show him the picture she took, but when you know it, her camera ran out of battery. Even here, it's not clear whether or not she didn't just charge it, or if there's something more sinister going on. Hinata dismisses the issue for now, but actually offers to drive her back to the academy. Koizumi hesitates, but eventually agrees. There's not many people on campus, but it's better than being back with her dad. This actually leads to one of 2 interim periods where he gets to play as another character. It's very brief, and to what I can see, determines which of 2 slightly different scenarios you'll play, but it's more about what puzzles you'll be solving and what chaser you'll be stuck with for the next hour. In the first interim, you actually play as Sayonji for a bit at Hope's Peak before Koizumi and Hinata arrive back. While her ID doesn't have the same health bar functionality as Koizumi's, it's still neat to see that they did make one for her as well. She has her own inventory, but don't worry about it too much, there's like 2 items to pick up. I don't know which of the 2 paths in the interim is the canon scenario, but the interim does give stronger rise to the possibility that Koizumi is being haunted by a restless spirit. I found the lily for Sato's desk before I found the metal bat, and when I went back to the cafeteria to show my findings before Koizumi arrived, Tsumiki was just staring at the fucking corner of the room like the Blair Witch Project. And doing the very smart thing of wandering up to her after saving, wound up leading to one of the other bad endings, because, of course. if a character who does not normally stare unblinkingly at a wall is now staring unblinkingly at a wall, that's a sign to get tougher. Saionji does, takes one of 2 key sets for the rec room and hides inside with the door locked, from what is clearly Sumiki acting completely fucking strangely. Hi, Neeks in the editing room. This is about where I lost confidence in my April Fool's joke. I don't think the story I wrote was particularly interesting, or even that good for an April Fool's joke. My only justification is I was sick most of the fucking time I was writing it, and I didn't bring my A game because, oh, it's an April Fool's joke. But I think I should have, because otherwise I would have had the confidence to see the whole thing through. Also, I had, 4 days to edit, half an hour of footage, and quite frankly, fuck that. I would rather work on other projects and play things that bring me joy. So yeah, this was an elaborate April Fool's prank. I was never contacted by Spike Chunsoft for anything. Yuta Nishiyama just doesn't exist, and neither do the projects that I listed. April Fools. We'll see you next time.